So before I start this, I'd like to sort of take a step back. I feel that we're really back in 1900. And 1900 was very interesting because Berlin was booming, as it is today. Startups everywhere. And the second thing that happened is we had a massive change in the transport industry. And to be clear, in sort of 1899, 1900, the oil industry basically went bankrupt. Why I say this is because I've lived through 10 years of seeing a solar industry going bankrupt, and I've also seen a utility industry go through restructuring and will probably continue going through restructuring in the next years. The interesting thing was the reason the oil industry went bankrupt was because of the electric light bulb. But the savior for the oil industry at the end of the day was the electric starter motor, which basically killed the electric motor in the automobile, and the rest is history. But what I want to say, and just so we get an idea of how big the opportunity is, by 1920, 25% of the GDP of the United States came from the oil industry or the automobile industry. And also, if we look at Germany and Europe, at that time, guess what? Bosch was founded, Renault was founded, Daimler was founded. Well, all these other companies that built carriages for horses, et cetera, all of them went bankrupt. It was new companies that came up into being. And I think we're at a similar point. And I also think it's very, very difficult for the automobile industry to make the changes that are needed. And that's really what I'm going to talk about here. And let me explain why this is. There's 4 technologies really that are changing things: materials, the electrification of the automobile, digitalization, and a move to services. I'll go through each of these one by one. Materials. I'll start with this. You can probably look at this and go, what's this? On the left there is silicon. Silicon is in basically every single mobile device we have, and it's the heart of a semiconductor. If you go into the Model 3 from Tesla today, they're using silicon carbide, right? Why are they doing that? Lower losses in terms of power transfers, et cetera, et cetera. I go to the second one, steel. What have I got on the right-hand side? Carbon. And I've got oil against lithium. And finally, we've got everything against graphene, because graphene really is a wonder material. I won't go into all this, but the point being is this is really difficult for a conservative automobile industry to actually make the changes that are necessary. The second thing is electrification. If you look at this here in terms of penetration, what you see is that the graphs keep going up every year. Now, at the top there, you'll see BNEF, which is Bloomberg, and they're obviously very aggressive in terms of what's going to happen in terms of automobile penetration. And if you look at all the oil-related companies or associations, they don't believe it. I believe, however, that BNF numbers are actually conservative. Let me explain why. The first one is simple. It's called cost. It's called reduction of 90% in battery cost over the last 10 years. We saw the exact same thing in solar, by the way. This is technology, mass production, and at the same time edging out every year improvements. The second thing is China. I just have there on the far right-hand side, what you see is the Chinese industry so far have raised in the last 2 years 10 billion euros worth of new equity into mobility and EV startups. Second thing is they're number 1 in all these already. They're number 1 in bikes, they're number 1 in cars, they're number 1 in buses, right? They're leading this industry. Next thing is commercial economics. I find it really interesting is that DHL, biggest logistics company in Europe, goes to all the German automobile or the European truck manufacturers and say, we want an electric bus. And what do they get back as an answer? Sorry, we're not going to do it for you. We don't believe in it. And guess what? DHL goes and buys a small startup and, yeah, they're producing it themselves. But it's not just trucks, it's buses. And I'll come back to in terms of the number of buses in China, is 300,000 buses is what China will have on the roads by the end of the year. 25% of their buses are electric. Meanwhile, back in sleepy Europe, 0. There's basically a handful of buses across the whole of Europe, right? There's no commercial bus available from any of the big bus manufacturers at present. The next thing is the opportunity. Just give you an idea of the size of it. This is a 210 billion market opportunity per year. That's how big it is. And I'm just talking about the powertrain and the internal combustion engine. If I go to look to the battery pack industry right now, just batteries, just that's going into automobile, it's 6 billion, right? So you can see straight away, hey, this is a great opportunity if I'm an entrepreneur in this space. The The fifth thing is Europe has to react. They have no choice. The graph in the middle, please, will summarize why they have to react. And that is that 25%, Europe makes 25% of the world's internal combustion engines and 3% of lithium-ion batteries. And be clear, we don't have any technology in Europe in lithium-ion. We've none, okay? It's all in Asia. So the 3% there, that's, low-level lithium-ion battery manufacturing, right? But Europe has no choice but to react. The next thing is what I call self-fulfilling prophecy. This is from Schaeffler. Schaeffler is a gearbox manufacturer. And the CEO gave this presentation a year ago, and he basically said 2030, his view was that 70% of all automobiles sold worldwide would have some form of electrification, right? So again, what this all means is suddenly we've got momentum behind electrification. The other thing to say is the automobile is digitalizing. Now, what does digitalizing mean? It means sensors are going into it. It means silicon carbide, new forms of semiconductors going into it. It's becoming more iPhone-like because that's what all of us demand. The other thing it means, though, is it's all controlled by software. And this is a real challenge for an automobile manufacturer because if you're a Tesla today, you're at 150 million lines of code. But guess what? If you autonomize the car, et cetera, it's going to go to 300 million. And again, you can see the numbers there comparing that to Microsoft Office or whatever. It's a multiple of 8 times that. The next thing is we're moving to services. What I will start with is there is no sector across the world that is raising the capital that is being raised in service in mobility services at present. I just took 3 companies, Didi, Uber, and Lyft, and they have raised $36 billion in money. $36 billion. That's how much they've raised. Because there's a view that this opportunity is huge, and they're right, because they're back in 1900. And they're looking, saying, hey, we can change the world on this, right? The interesting thing is that Uber's last valuation was $68.3 billion. This would make it the number 2 automobile manufacturer, or in terms of valuations, automobile company in the world. It is likely to go an IPO this year at a higher valuation than any other automobile manufacturer in the world, right? So there's something happening here. What does this all mean? Well, what it means, first and foremost, is that we're going to move to mobility as a service. I won't go into all of these, but what I will say is that the automobile manufacturer will offer full service packages. Hyundai are doing this in California at present. They basically say, don't buy the car, we'll give everything to you, fuels for free, insurance is in it, servicing, et cetera, all in a one-stop shop, right? And there's lots of different other types of service that we're going to see as well. The second thing is that incumbents will invest massively in new technology and business models. Daimler became the biggest venture capitalist in the Western world last year. Now, I don't know whether this is desperation or there really is a strategy behind it, but the numbers are pretty enormous. The third thing is incumbents are not good at dealing with change. I saw this from Forbes. This is quite interesting. Nokia, 1 billion customers. Can anyone catch the cell phone king? Okay, the rest is history. But I do want to go to the right-hand side, which is BMW and their most innovative car, which is the i8. And I have a BMW, so I have to deal with this every day. This controller reminds me of an Atari controller from the 1980s that I played with. All right? And that's a real concern. That's a real concern, because I want to have an iPad in my car. My daughter, when we bought the car firstly, was going, what do I do with the screen? I go, Paula, I'm sorry, this is BMW. What can I do? The fourth thing is that the electrification will have a massive impact on the wealth of nations. Firstly, there's a move from, and I use oil there, oil to lithium, but there's a huge, big change in the resources that go into the automobile. And this is very difficult for the manufacturers to deal with, right? The second thing is, you look at this, the internal combustion engine, suddenly I've got a battery. And again, different materials. I'm not dealing with ThyssenKrupp or US Steel the way I have for the last 100 years. I suddenly have to go and buy cobalt from Glencore. Different culture than Volkswagen, I can tell you that much. Not easy, right? The fifth thing is we will see lots of different forms of transport. Again, back to 1900. We didn't know if the electric engine or the internal combustion engine would win. I must admit, I look at this Hyperloop technology, I think it's pretty cool. And that could be a real interesting game changer. Obviously, we've got Lilium. There's quite a lot of these type of flying as a service type businesses that are coming out. interesting as well. The sixth thing is my daughter, she's 7, will not learn to drive. And even if she will, she won't want to. Why? Because it's a waste of time, right? The car in the future will be different. Down on the right-hand side, by the way, that bottom right there is a Chinese company. And guess what? Suddenly you've got a mobile office, or she can play games in it, or whatever, right? But she's not going to own it, and she's not going to actually get a driving license. The scary thing for us in Europe is this. And I've looked at China for many, many years. China has always followed. This is the first time China is taking a lead in a technology. Completely. Strategic. Look at EV sales. 50% of EV sales globally last year. The lithium-ion battery, 50% China. Electric bus sales are 99%. Electric scooter sales, 90%. Rare earth metals. Guess what? If you want to go and buy to build electric drive, you need rare earth metals. They're coming out of China. Graphite goes into lithium-ion batteries, comes out of China. And the interesting thing is not just that as well, it's on the services side. Didi, which is the Uber of China, 450 million car users, 21 million drivers, and I heard the statistic that I put in is they've got 4 million electric cars. 8, and this is for me the most interesting thing, is the cost of distance is going to go down. And that's the big, big change that I think is going to come out of this. Cost of goods, people, and information goes down to fall, which means that actually I think the way we go to work, et cetera, is going to change. You can work from home. You can work wherever you want anymore because the cost of distance is gone down. That's it. By the way, I should tell you a little bit. I'm not an analyst. I used to be an analyst. I work Alexa Capital as corporate finance. So what we do is we provide innovative solutions, financial solutions into companies in energy and mobility. That's what we do.
And you are helping a company, can we mention the name, from Estonia at the moment?
Skeleton, yeah.
Skeleton Technologies.
Yeah.
So if
among others.
He's helping helping Skeleton raise a ton of money.
Hope so.
But it was a great pitch, a very great presentation. Gerard, thank you so much. Special round of applause for our Irish guy.